Hello all you brawlers, I'm King Link and I'm doing a last look and review of River City Ransom Underground. So, a spoiler warning, this game is going to require me to discuss most of the game, including a heavy discussion of the story and the end of the game, at least in overview look. The reason is, there's a lot that goes off the rail late in the game, and the fact is, I feel like I have to discuss it because it's what made me come to the final score so firmly. I'm playing early on in the game, it's about 30 minutes to an hour into the game, so nothing's going to be spoiled on the screen, but I will talk about it. This is a long review, and I really want you to understand my thought process in this game. Let's get started. So, with everything being said, I was super excited about River City Ransom Underground, and if you look at my first look, it's obvious. I was smiling the whole time I was playing the game. I was excited to play a sequel to a game that I had played almost 30 years ago, and I had such high hopes for the game. I had my nostalgic goggles on, and I was ready to argue and say the classic gameplay was there for a reason. However, River City Ransom Underground is a mixed bag. There's really 3 or 4 parts of the story that lead to 3 very different experiences for me. So let's start with the game beginning with a 20-year-old prologue. You go back in time 20 years, and it's set up as a tutorial. You play as Alex and Ryan from the original game and climb the building on the way to beat the boss from the original game called Slick. This is just a tutorial level, but it's rather good and brings back all the memories of the original game. It's only about 15 minutes long, and you can see that too in the first look, and how it teaches the game. From there, the real game starts, and the player is able to choose one of 4 playable characters. There's actually a lot of good choices here. There's a boxer, a breakdancer, a Shokotun, at least that's who I'm playing as right now, Glenn. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, and then there's also a luchador, though he doesn't wear a mask. Each character actually does control differently, and they all get their own special moves and controls, and for that, it's cool. With that set up, the player is told to go to class, where they're informed they're part of the Warriors remake. Or really, the mayor appears on the TV and wants everyone to kick their ass because they're part of the flop game. Now, fighting happens, you beat up some guys, including the principal, a Bobo from Double Dragon, on the way out of school, and you reach a garage that's actually home to Alex and Ryan. So, from here, let's call this part 2. You've seen the tutorial, you played the character a little bit. Now, you go out and fight a number of gangs for some reason. The game gives you reasons, but it's very, hey, there's one of the bad guys over here. Slick is back from the tutorial, and you eventually end up fighting him. Each gang here feels unique, and the bosses are great. After 2 or 3, though, the game then has you go revisit bosses from the first game, which is a great concept, but there's just 3 in a row of guys that you just find and they run away from you and create these rather awful chase sequences. My understanding is they were worse in the original game. The good news is they made them easier. The bad news is they're still there and they don't work as a story. So from there, you do get to fight Otis from the original game, but overall that whole section is not a compelling part of the game. The idea you could go back and revisit the original bosses of the first game had so much potential that I'm annoyed the game throws it away. Otis is a great boss, and the gang bosses are excellent fights. However, there's not many of them. There's also not that many gangs, only a few are in the game. So what happened after you beat part 2 if there's no more gangs? Well, River City Ransom Underground sets up a twist here and sends you after the mayor. We're going to call this part 3. I admit, this could have been a really solid end of the game. Taking down the mayor as the end of the Warriors or just a game, yeah, I was on board and excited. However, this part of the game started to lose the edge of it. There's a point where you have to go get a bottle of milk for some characters, badass characters who could have done it themselves, and there's another point where you collect dog tags from military agents. Neither of these quests make any sense in game, and as I type this out, I wonder what they're smoking. I'm reading it, and again, I'm thinking, what the hell was happening? It mostly feels like filler to me, but not even acceptable filler. You're at the end of the game. Let's get done with it. At this point, we actually have the 3-act structure in place, and while part 3 is weak, it could have been fixed with a few things. It could have been the finale of the game, and shortened up, removed the pointless side quests, and I could have been really happy with the game as a full product. Sadly, that's not what happened. Instead, we go, confront the mayor, and end up getting another twist, and this time we have to fight a clone army and trudged over the entire map a 3rd time. This is part 4, and this is one of the hardest, most frustrating parts of the game. Okay, it's the end of the game, that's understandable, but it's just so annoying that I gave up on the final level because I realized I was no longer having fun. The story made no sense, the gameplay was just frustrating, and I wonder where the game I bought went. I want to fight against some gangs and see interesting enemies. I got that, but that was part 1 and 2. Why am I fighting clone armies based on those gangs, and why did I go after the mayor if he wasn't the big bad? It's just, let's go kick his ass. You know, to the developers, you're remaking River City Ransom, guys. Why is it so hard to tell a simple ransom or revenge story, even when the game was telling the warriors it's still a good game? That's a good movie, and it's the game that it should have been based, the movie it should have been based on. Okay, but here's the thing, I broke the story up into 4 parts for a specific reason. You know, the first part, I was loving it. The memories of the original game was flooding back to me. The second part, I was enjoying myself. It was exactly what I wanted. I was like, yep, this is 2018's River City Ransom. Good. Problem is, the third part, I started realizing I was getting a little bit bored of the game, especially with the annoying fetch quests. Okay, but the fourth part of the game is what made me really hate the game. It made me realize how monotonous the fighting is, how many bugs were in the game, and how much I just disliked the story. Now, let me talk about gameplay because, yeah, the story is bad, but good gameplay could save this. The fact is, if you kept the gangs around and kept fighting gangs and then bosses, maybe I would have accepted the game more, even with the story. When the game is doing that and showing you an inventive gang and boss like the nerds or the warlocks, it does rather well. I actually like that part of the game. You know, the combat itself is kind of weak, and I mentioned it's monotonous. Yeah, it is, but it's based on an NES game that only had 2 buttons, and here you have 5 buttons. Punch, kick, grapple, guard, and it's simplistic, but that's what it takes. There's also a special button, that's the 5th button. The problem is, I only needed the kick button when I was playing Pruby, and here I'm playing Glenn, I only need the punch button for like 90% of the game. Most enemies don't block well, and even when they do, they drop their guard for a second and you can start to stun lock the enemies. Enemies don't fall down unless they're out of energy, so as long as you're attacking them consistently, you're going to kick their ass. And even when they do fall down, you can do more damage to an enemy on the ground. The tutorial shows that there's this interesting idea of enemies only being able to be damaged by a certain attack. And that could have been a very interesting mechanic, having to attack an enemy with punches or maybe kicks or maybe aerial attacks or weapons. The thing is, it's never used outside of the tutorial, which taught you those attacks. Now, maybe it was just a piece of the tutorial, but it made it sound like that was part of the real game, and the thing is, the game would have benefited from that. So, really, I just used my 3-kick combo as Prudy, and most bosses, once hit once, was a cakewalk to beat. You could just keep beating them up in the same fashion. Most enemies didn't stand a chance, and my character was relatively powerful. You know, the game starts with different enemies, and there's some good choices here. The nerds, the droids, which are jocks, and the warlocks. Each has a different set of animations to attack you, and some ranged attacks. And that's where the games really work. The problem is, that's only in part 2. When you hit part 3, you start fighting the rich kids, I think is technically one of them. There's the military, the police, the security guards, and all the enemies start to feel the same. The bosses are no longer unique or interesting, and you're stuck fighting with that simplistic combat system that you can spam the same combo over and over, but now you're fighting less interesting enemies and told to go on an adventure, more exploration than beating up gangs. And it just ruins that feeling for me, and I don't think the engine is made for that. Now, with that being said, there's a couple big bugs that should have been caught earlier as well. The first is the level up screen is incorrect. If you're level 21, for instance, or in this case, let's say level 1 or 2, if you go to the screen, it might say that you need a certain amount of points. That's for the 3rd level, not the 2nd level that you're actually trying to get up to. It shows the wrong number, and I don't understand why this wasn't fixed. The game's been out for almost 18 months, a year and a half. Why? In addition, there's actually a rather bad quest bug early on in the game that won't allow the player to advance the quest. You go back to the hideout and you're ready to do something, and the problem is the game doesn't advance. The solution was, for me, to go online and find out where the next quest starts, and manually start it. But that's only if you go research it. Oddly enough, I'm reading posts from 2017 that, early on, right after the game launched, that are saying that this bug is happening to them. Again, why not solve these bugs when they're out there? There's other pieces of this game that annoy me though. Your character levels up, but the other characters that you have don't. You see me go from, I was using the boxer, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I switched to Glenn, the fighter that I'm using here, and he's level 1. The fact is, if you want to ever select a new character, you're going to get a severely under-level character, and now you're going to have to fight and work his way back up, not to mention going out and buying food so that you can level up his stats. So, in addition, the game also has a huge difficulty spike on the last level, and it's done by cheap attacks that will eat your damage, and really the difficulty in this game is more just about the very long levels that are twice or 3 times as long as the average level, and there's no checkpoints. You might have to go 4 or 5 screens to go almost anywhere in this game. When you're doing the final level, you're going about 20 screens. Even going up to the mayor's about 12 screens. It's a much longer distance. That's how they do difficulty, not with a more interesting fight. So, let me talk about a little more. The level design is actually really good often, but the world is empty. There's this nerd club, the nerd area, that has 3 screens devoted to them. Arcade with a bathroom, and then 2 screens of a mini golf course. And that's really solid. But there's also this health club somewhere that's never used. Why? There's actually an entire district of the map that I believe the players don't even have to enter to beat the game. Why is there all this empty space? Why did you spend time developing it? The thing is, at the end of the day, I wanted to give this game a good score. I wanted to see my old friend Ransom and tell you the legend lives on, or he's doing pretty well for himself. Even if it wasn't a great game, it should be easy to recommend this because it's a retro game banking on nostalgia. Throw on your nostalgia goggles, remember an original game, and play it. If you like River City Ransom, you should like this game based on it. It's kind of like if you like System Shock or Deus Ex, try Bioshock. Okay, that's what people said, but maybe not there. Bioshock was still a good game, but they were different games. That's what they try to sell. Here, they try to sell this as a revival of River City Ransom, and it's not true either. The problem is, it's really not like River City Ransom. It's banking on the nostalgia with the name, but the game here is significantly worse than the NES game in my opinion. The story isn't as good, and I honestly don't understand why this was acceptable to any fan who backed this game or supported it. I love River City Ransom, I really do. And they didn't need to reinvent the wheel. Just have the player fight against maybe 5, maybe 10 gangs. Make them clever, nerds, jocks, warlocks. Okay, you got those right. How about some clowns, ROTC, if you want the military, a racer gang. I mean, there's so many guys who have done this before, and it could have been done. You can come up with 10 gangs, have you fight your way to each one, have maybe a few more guys in there, and you call it a day. Leave the mayor to be the big boss at the end if that's what you wanted, and you might have had a great remake of the original game. But no. Instead, you're going to get 8 gangs, and those are gangs with big quotes around it, with only 3 of them, if I can remember right, maybe 2, having a true boss fight for that gang. If you could count Otis, who doesn't really belong to a gang but would be a jock, maybe it's 4. But most of them aren't interesting, and most of the gangs, that is. And overall, it's not a good experience. The story is poorly executed, and the story isn't that interesting even if you look at what it's trying to do. The gameplay is repetitive, which admittedly it is based on the NES game, and while weak gameplay might be understandable, there's nothing else to make that acceptable. There's nothing that made me want to play more on. And really, the fact is, the game isn't that fun. That's the biggest crime here. I wanted better, and I deserve better. The fans deserve better, and you know what? This franchise deserves better than River City Ransom Underground. But the fact is, this isn't a very good game, and it's not up to snuff. What's worse is, This game was fun for a good amount. They knew what they were doing, and I enjoyed exploring the world and fighting new gangs and having a little story for a reason. But there's this point where I feel like the developers said they didn't want to make River City Ransom anymore and gave the players a different gamer experience. At that point, they started down the path of ruining the game, and honestly, they just kept going. The final product isn't a good River City Ransom game, but it also has all the flaws and baggage of the original River City Ransom from 29 years ago. And that's really problematic because, yeah, I love the original game, but it's a 29-year-old game. It has all the same issues. The thing is, I was really stressed about this final score here. The fact is, this isn't just a bad game to me. It's a travesty, and I have to score it as such. Here's the thing, River City Ransom Underground is getting a 1.5 out of 5. I don't understand why people accept this. Personally, I'm pissed off I spent even $5 on it, and I'm warning people away, including all of you. It's just banking on nostalgia and not even delivering on the promise of that nostalgia. Go play the original game from the NES, go emulate it if you have to, but don't play River City Ransom Underground. It's just not good enough. Well, with that said, I'm King Link. We're going to stick with the different endings, so consider subscribing. It helps you, it helps me. I appreciate it, but we have something a bit different coming up. If you're a fan of amusement parks and roller coasters, you probably should stick around because I'm going to be tackling Planet Coaster. I'm actually really excited about this. I finally got a chance to play it, so I'll take you on a few of my rides from the park. They're not great, but hey, they're my rides. So until then, I'm King Link, and I'm out of here.